Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I'm doing another video about what you know what. I'm talking more about books. This has become a booktube channel, I think. Let's see. It's also Friday morning-ish, and I live on a very loud street. In a few hours, it will be very quiet, but it's at the time when all of the honking is happening outside, so I hope that that's not a disruption for you. So I'm here to talk about my February reading wrap-up, just to share with you everything I read in February. I read 4 books, which is not that much, but it's, you know, I set my reading goal for the whole year at 15 books. And like I've already read 5, so I should like be on track to hit my goal, if not like go a little further. Okay, so I read mostly on my Kindle, but I also read 1 physical book. So, well, half of it, but I'll explain that in a second. I'm looking at my Goodreads over here. That's what I'm looking at. If you have a Goodreads and you want to be friends on there, it's in the down station area. You can click on it. Also, if you want to subscribe, I would very much appreciate it. Okay, so the first book that I read was Joan Didion's new collection of essays called Let Me Tell You What I Mean. Listen, I love Joan Didion. Obviously, I saw that this was coming out a few months before it was due to release. And I was so excited, like I pre-ordered it in a second, and then the morning that it came out, it arrived on my Kindle, and I read it in that one day. So I did not waste any time with this one. However, I was a bit disappointed, I have to say. I think if you've never read Joan Didion before, this is not the one to start with, okay, so I've read, other work of hers that I've really loved. I loved South and West. I loved Slouching Towards Bethlehem. And like any collection of essays, however, you don't love all of them always. That's my particular experience. So there are just certain essays in a collection that I don't get along with as much. So what I was disappointed about in this book was that the majority of the essays were that for me. The essays that I thought were amazing were A Trip to Xanadu was one of them. Other one was Why I Write, and another one was Telling Stories. There were a few essays that really focused on her process and just her thoughts about writing, and those were the strongest for me. In my reading experience, I really enjoyed those. I thought they were gems. I wrote down things from them. I highlighted a lot. And then the other essays were just about people or situations that I don't have any prior knowledge about, and it didn't make me want to know about them, and it also didn't educate me about what or who they were, which is okay. I just didn't enjoy so much reading those ones because I just kind of was like, okay, I like it's going over my head. So I would say, like, if you've read, I don't know, a lot of Joan Didion, of course, pick this one up. And I think that the stories about her writing about her writing process, if you're into that kind of thing, that's definitely worth getting this book for. But I was just disappointed that it wasn't like a, 10 out of 10 for me, loved everything about it. Yeah, so that was kind of my experience. Some of the essays just kind of fell flat for me a little bit, or I just didn't feel like I knew enough, which is just also not a nice feeling all the time when you're reading something. I'm glad that I read it, and I'm really glad that I have it so I can go back to a few of those essays and reread. Yeah, and I like her voice and her writing voice, so it was enjoyable. Just, yeah, now I'm just repeating myself. The next book I read, I think this was the order, was Authority by Jeff VanderMeer. This is the second book in the Southern Reach trilogy, which is his sci-fi trilogy that I spoke about already in previous videos. So this is the second book. Just like a quick recap if you don't know. So basically the first book is called Annihilation, and it's about this area called Area X. I feel like I'm on a loop because I talked about this already. But Area X is some kind of like sanctioned off area that was created by some kind of environmental event that we're not sure about, and there's a government agency called the Southern Reach, which sends kind of expeditions of people into Area X with certain skill sets, and they go in and basically are supposed to report about what's going on there and their observations and then bring them back. And it's not going well. Like, a lot of the expeditions have failed. They either don't come back or they come back in some kind of zombie-like state, just unrecognizable, or they have cancer, all of them. So it's like there's just some mysterious things going on there. I really loved the first book a lot. And this one, I also really loved. This one, Authority, is more, so we're not inside this like lush, atmospheric, very kind of thriller-esque environment that like the first book kind of takes place in. We're inside the government agency inside the Southern Reach. So just the environment is different. So of course I enjoyed the first one because of kind of this vivid imagery that comes from being inside this pristine wilderness area that is Area X, and this is like more bureaucratic. And a little bit less thriller-y. However, there are very much elements of suspense. And I really like Jeff VanderMeer. I really like his writing. I really love the whole concept of this trilogy. So I was like very much enjoying it. There got like a point sort of in the middle where I just like wasn't finding myself picking it up and continuing. But then I got over that little hump and I just devoured the rest of the book. And it really kind of picked back up the pace towards the end. Again, I think I said this in another video. This is not the kind of book that's gonna give you the answers. It's not traditional in a sci-fi sense, as I've heard from people who read more sci-fi than I do, that it's not traditional. So like you're left to put together a lot of different pieces, and I really felt like I was rereading passages being like, is that a clue? Like, what is that saying to, like, am I reading into this? Am I missing something? But it was fun. It was fun for me to, like, in this context, to read like that. And yeah, so I really loved it, and I'm excited to read the last one, Acceptance. Hopefully I'm gonna read that this month in March. Next, I finally read The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. Listen, this book is so good, and I'm really late. Many people have read it. It was circulating everywhere on BookTube, on Bookstagram, whatever you want to call it. It's a very loved book. It was published in June 2020, so it's new. So I finally picked it up after seeing it everywhere, and I just felt like I wanted to finish a few things that I was reading before I kind of got into it. And wow, I just enjoyed it so much. I also passed it on to my mom, and she read it also like around the same time, and then we had like a great conversation about it. I'm waiting for my dad to read it so that we can like really talk about it, all of us. This book is about two twin sisters that grow up in this fictional town in Louisiana in the States. It's a Black community that lives in this kind of town, but their skin is so light that they could look white. And that's what kind of is like the special thing about this town. And so we're following two twin sisters who grow up there. Desiree is a bit more like outspoken. She's very opinionated. She's a bit kind of like strong-willed. And Stella is a bit more quieter one. She's a bit more, she does better in school. She's just sort of the quieter twin, but they're very, very, very close, and they're very, you know, attached to one another. We have a very, very close relationship. So basically the story is that they decide one day that they're gonna leave this town called Mallard, and they're gonna go to New Orleans, which is like a bigger town in Louisiana. So they kind of escape, they kind of flee one night in the middle of the night, and the story just unfolds to kind of follow the two twins and their sort of divergence. They diverge, and one sister decides she wants to start passing fully as a white person, as a white woman, and the other one doesn't. The other one marries a like very dark-skinned Black man, and they have a child together. And then the sister that decides to pass for white marries a white man, and they have a child. And so also these children look very different because of their parents. And it's just about, it was so fascinating. It was about also colorism, which I think is just a topic that was really, really interesting for me to read about. I think Bennett just writes so beautifully, and this topic is so interesting, and it made for like a very riveting story, and also just shed a lot of light on racism, colorism within the Black community, and I just thought it was so interesting that she writes these two characters, and just by kind of deciding different things regarding their identity, like created such a two different lives for them and their kids. And I also love the way that this book progresses. So we're progressing in time, and we're changing characters. So we're changing like perspective, like point of view is changing on each of the different characters, but we're still moving ahead in time. And I thought that worked so well. And I was just so captivated, and I couldn't put it down. Also, her writing is just so beautiful, and it explores so many important themes, and I just think it's a must-read, 100%. It was a 5 out of 5, and wow, I just, like, I thought the characters were also so layered. I thought that they were so lovable, yet so, surprising, and also like irritating at some points, but it just made them like such full humans that you were reading about, so, or reading with, and living with while you were inside the story. So I thought it was just a 10 out of 10 hit. You must read it. Everyone, pick it up. Yes. I just like continue to like unveil that I'm terrible at describing books, so I hope that like someone is getting something out of this. Okay, and then the last book that I read was Hear the Wind Sing by Haruki Murakami. So I have here this edition, which is called Wind Pinball, and it's 2 books in one. It's his first 2 novels, which he calls kitchen table novels, kitchen table books, which means like he wrote them at his kitchen table. So the first story is Hear the Wind Sing, and the second one is Pinball 1973. So I only read the first one, which was Hear the Wind Sing. Maybe at some point I will read the second one. I just felt like after the first one, I just wanted to move to something else. Okay, to be honest, it's not my favorite thing I've read of his, for sure. And he even says that, what I think is great about this edition is that there are introductions by him about these specific stories, about the time in his life which led him to write them, which also sort of was the time of his life that he started his career as a writer. So I think actually that what's worth getting your hands on this book, whether it's a library or someone who has it, is to read his introductions. Those are on point and amazing and really, really fascinating to kind of read also about how he writes, how he started writing in Japanese, like originally, because that's his mother tongue, but then getting kind of sick of like the Japanese language and how it didn't feel authentic to him in certain ways, so he would start to write in English, but because he had a very limited like vocabulary, I guess, because it's his second language, so then he kind of had to write like much simpler, but it then actually revealed something about his style that we sort of like know about Murakami now. Like the Murakami prose is very like pared back, and the language is quite simple, but the images are really vivid and everything. So I think like he discovered something about writing in English, and then he would translate that back into Japanese, and then he kind of found his Murakami Japanese, which I thought was just so fascinating. So I thought that was amazing. For the story, in terms of the story, to be honest, I can't tell you even what it really was about. I mean, it's sort of following these two male characters, sort of like drinking, going to a bar, meeting women, then going back to the bar, then talking to each other, then drinking more, then talking about books, then talking about music, then drinking, then like this is kind of what it was. Like I open it and it says, "I smiled and took another swig of beer," which is just like the whole book. It's sort of meandering. It's not really, we don't get anywhere in the story. It's not like there's an arc. It doesn't reach anywhere. It's just sort of like kind of a character exploration, but not really even that. So like I'll tell you why I enjoyed reading it was because the chapters are so short. Some of them are 1 page and probably at most 4 pages. And just when I picked this up, I was also craving to like hold a physical book and not read on my Kindle. And my attention span just really loved the fact that they were short chapters, and it made me read it so quickly. Even though I didn't feel at all invested in the story, I didn't put it down. So I don't know, it was an enjoyable, I guess, kind of experience, but I wouldn't say you have to read it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading it unless you want to go through like Murakami's whole body of work. Then I think there's something to reading this since it's his first work. Also, I found like the portrayal specifically of the women in this book kind of problematic, which I've heard a little bit about like Murakami's writing of women in his stories, and some people taking issue with that or just raising questions about it. So if you have an opinion about that, I would love to hear, because specifically in this story, I found it sort of off-putting in some ways, but also I didn't know what to make of it. To be honest, also, like, books from the perspective of a straight man, in this kind of way, where it's like sort of about meeting his buddies and like drinking and talking about women and things like that, it's just not my, it's just not my brand. So interesting, but like probably won't read the second one, or like it will just be at a later time. Blah, 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 blah. I talked forever. You're exhausted. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you got something from it. If you read any of these, definitely let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you have recommendations for me, also leave them in the comments. I'm really enjoying BookTube. I'm really enjoying like getting in touch with some other booktubers and kind of forming the seeds of little cute friendships on here and on like Bookstagram. So that's been really nice and I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you are too, and I'll see you in my next video. I'll probably talk to you about what I plan on reading this month. Let's see. Have a great day. Bye.